Podcast team contracts and everything that you need to know. Working with a podcast team is important. It's fantastic, right up until the moment that it's not. Imagine what happens if your co host suddenly wants to bail or your producer decides to take your content and launch a competing show. Well, today I'm breaking down why contracts are essential to protect your podcast and keep your team relationships running smoothly. Stick around. Hey there, and welcome back to Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and today we're diving into a topic that every podcaster really needs to understand: having contracts with your team members on your show. Now, this is something you don't want to overlook if you are serious about your show's long-term success. But before we get into why contracts are a must, let's talk about why you really need to build a team in the first place. If you've been producing your podcast all on your own for any time at all, you know just how much work goes into it. Researching topics, coordinating guests, recording, editing, creating promotional graphics, posting on social media, and on top of all of that, trying to find ways to grow your audience and monetize your show. It's a lot. And that's where having a team really comes in. With the right team members, you can delegate some of those tasks and really focus on the things you're good at, the strengths, whether it's hosting, interviewing, strategizing, whatever. A good team can also bring fresh perspectives, new skills, and more creativity to your show. They help you amplify your efforts and take your podcast to the next level, especially when it comes to that marketing and distribution side of things. So if you're serious about growing your podcast, working with a team is the way to go. But here's the thing: the more people you have involved, the more important it is that you have everything in writing. A solid contract with each part of your team, each participant in your team, really lays out expectations, prevents conflicts, and gives everyone some peace of mind. Otherwise, you could be setting yourself up for some serious headaches down the road. So, why you need team contracts? Well, whenever you're collaborating with other people, everyone is investing their time, their talent, sometimes even their money into the project. And without clear agreements in place, things can get messy fast. A contract sets those expectations right from the start and tells each team member exactly what their role is, what they can expect to get out of it, and ultimately who owns the content, excuse me. Think of it as a blueprint for your working relationship, whether it's with co-hosts, editors, producers, or marketers. A contract will help establish a professional framework and ensures that everyone is on the same page about their duties and the value that they bring to the table. And remember, when two people or more people working together come together to make stuff, they will be deemed joint owners, joint authors of the copyright in that stuff, unless there's a separate, different intention that's clear. And the writing is the most important way to get that intention clarified so there can be no misunderstandings, no joint authorship, no joint ownership, and no conflicts later on. All right, so what clauses must be included in these kinds of contracts? Well, some key clauses include the roles and responsibilities. First thing you want to spell out in any team contract is: what is this person's role? What are they supposed to do? What's expected of them? And be as detailed and thorough as possible here. For example, if you have a co-host, you need to outline who's responsible for doing research and who's doing the interviews and what kind of prep you expect them to do, who's handling the social media. If you're working with an editor, define the tasks that they'll be handling. Are they just cleaning up the audio, or are they also creating promotional clips? But the more specific you are, the less room there is for confusion or misunderstandings or disputes down the line. Next up, compensation and revenue sharing. Now, money might not be flowing yet, but it is a critical piece to include, especially for future planning. If you're just starting out, you might not be paying anyone a salary, but consider what happens when sponsorships, donations, or ad revenue start to roll in. Will you split the profits evenly, or is the revenue going to be distributed based on contribution? Is there a net profits calculation to be made so that expenses get reimbursed to the people who spent them first? Those kinds of things. So this compensation and reimbursements clause, revenue sharing clause, really ensures that when your show starts to generate money, everyone knows exactly what it is that they are entitled to. Number 3, the intellectual property rights. This is a big one, especially in the creative space. Who owns the show's name and logo and episode content? Is it equally co-owned, joint authorship like we talked about, or does one person control and hold all those rights. So be sure to define who owns and controls things. And make sure that it includes, if appropriate, a work made for hire clause that everybody else who's contributing is agreeing that the producer of the show is its owner. This prevents any disputes over branding or the content itself if someone decides to leave the show. Okay, number 4 is decision-making authority. This clause addresses who makes the final call if there is a disagreement. If you and a co-host disagree on a guest or a topic or how to monetize, whose vote wins? Or if you're deciding on a marketing strategy, who has the authority to implement it? Outlining how decisions will be made and who has what power in those relationships, and even how ties will be broken if it's just 2 or an even number of you. So outlining that really keeps your team from getting stuck in deadlocks over creative and business decisions. And it's okay to divide that up. Creative will be with one party and business with another, those kinds of things. Number 5 is exit strategies. Let's face it, people's priorities change, and you need a plan for when a team member wants to leave. So a good clause here could cover how someone can step away, what happens to the material they were part of creating, and what rights they have to use any part of that in the future. But also, are they being bought out or compensated some way? Having all this kind of thing sorted out up front can make transitions much more smooth if someone does decide to move on. Or another thing is if they die or become disabled, their family will want to know and have some clarity about these things. And you don't want to, trust me, you don't want to be in a dispute over creative or business decisions with your former co-host's, widow or something like that. A 6th provision to include is non-compete and confidentiality law language. You don't want a former team member to walk away and start a competing show using the same format and ideas. Now, controlling the intellectual property is a good start, but you may want a clause that also puts a limit on what they can do in terms of launching something similar, using the same formats and things like that. Non-compete clauses are starting to come into some sort of disfavor, but there are still a few workarounds that can limit a former team member's ability to compete directly with the business based on confidentiality, for example. A confidentiality clause prevents them from sharing proprietary or using proprietary information like contact information, guest information, unpublished episodes, market strategies, all those kinds of things. So some other special considerations we need to think about when it comes to podcasting specifically, because this is a unique blend of creative and business partnerships. It's not just about producing the content, but also about building a brand and community. So you really have to think about how the branding is going to work, what the guest booking processes are going to look like, revenue generation and division. For example, if a co-host's personality is an important part of the show's brand, how are you going to handle things if they leave or become incapable of participating? Does the brand stay with the remaining team members, or does it go with the departing co-host? So make sure to address who gets access to the social media accounts, who controls the revenue from the ads, what happens if to interviews that haven't aired yet. Those are the kinds of things that are specific to podcasting that can easily be overlooked if you're using a sort of more generic contract template. Common pitfalls to worry about. Even when they have the best of intentions, there are going to be some mistakes that podcasters just make when it comes to using deals with their teams. First of all, verbal agreements. Relying on that handshake deal might feel friendly, but these kinds of agreements often miss important points. They're a little vague, and they really don't hold up well if there's a dispute that arises. And people's memories, let's face it, we all have the memory that's most favorable to our point of view and our position. So really always best to get these things in writing. Another mistake is ignoring the future revenue possibilities. You're not making money now, and it's fine. That's tempting to skip over the revenue sharing part. But what if you land a big sponsor a year from now, for example? Plan for that success from the start so everyone knows what to expect when the money starts coming in. It is a lot harder to negotiate these kinds of deals when everybody's a year in and the money's starting to come and they're feeling overworked and underappreciated or whatever it is. So it's best to get these things done early on. Another is failure to update the contracts from time to time. Your show will evolve, and the roles each team member plays will also evolve. So it's a good idea to review your contracts annually and make any updates that are needed, so they always reflect the current state of your show and the relationships. Now, annual may be a little too frequently for a co-host or a co-producer, but it should be the kind of thing that gets scheduled for a revisiting and maybe an amendment of the existing contract. From time to time, you have to decide what time makes sense. So listen, if you are serious about protecting your podcast by having these kinds of agreements in place, visit podcastlawforms.com today, where you'll find our full suite of lawyer-drafted contract templates and forms, along with easy-to-follow instructions tailored for podcasters like you. And hey, if you want to go even deeper, I have a planning guide, a podcast prenup planning guide available for you. If you just visit podcastprenup.com, that's podcastprenup.com, and it's podcastprenup.com/guide. It's the ultimate tool for setting up a solid foundation before you launch your show or bring on new team members. And that's going to be it for this episode of Legit Podcast Pro. Please remember, good agreements make for good neighbors. Clear agreements make for smooth collaborations. Don't leave things to chance. Protect yourself, your team, and your show with the right kinds of contracts. And hey, before you go, please check out this video, Level Up Your Podcast Success, Essential Frameworks for Professional Creators. Right over here, it's showing on your screen, or you can find it on YouTube if you're listening to the audio. Thanks for checking out this episode, tuning in, and until next time, keep your podcast legit, keep on being professional, and keep on making great content.